Welcome everyone. My name is Vojta Jína, and I work on Angular JS team. But today I would like to talk a little bit about testing JavaScript, and especially about running the test. So imagine, guys, you have some problem to solve. Let's say you have a bunch of files and you want to rename them, right? And there is obviously some pattern in the renaming. So I think you have two kinds of people. The first group of people, they'll just go through it and manually rename the files, and let's say it's gonna take 20 minutes or something. And then you have the second group of people, and you know what they are gonna do, right? They're gonna write script for it. And well, it might take maybe 30 minutes to write this script, but it's still better because next time you're gonna do this thing, you already have the script, right? I mean, to be honest, next time when you need the script, you already lose the script, so you will write it again. But I think it's more about the attitude and what you believe in, And that's exactly what's me and what's the whole Angular team. We basically try to automate everything, and that's why we do testing. Because if you think about it, I think pretty much everyone does test, right? You change your code, and then you open the application and you see whether it changes, whether it works. So the only thing that we do differently with automation, we just have script to run these tests so that you don't have to do it manually. And we try to automate pretty much everything, like pushing to our homepage. Whenever you push to master on GitHub, it gets automatically deployed. We generate the documentation. Let me actually show that. This is Angular documentation. It's all generated, right? And whenever I push to GitHub, it automatically generates the documentation. And if you look into this documentation, there is, for most of the APIs, there is an example. If I make it bigger, this is like ng-click directive, and there is an example how to use that. And there is a live example where you can see how it works, this code. And there is something more. There is end-to-end test. And this is code like for you how to write test for such a thing. And do you know what we do with this? We parse this whole thing, and we basically parse out these tests, and then we run them. So again, whenever I push to GitHub, it runs through all the documentation to test whether the example still works. Look at this. This is the test suite. If I refresh it, it's kind of fast, so it's difficult to see. But there is the whole documentation page, and it keeps trying it goes through the whole documentation and try all the examples where it works. Because that's easier for us, rather than checking the whole documentation whenever I make any change. The same is with changelog. We have a convention for commit messages, and we generate changelog for that. And I could list so many other things, but basically we try to automate everything. And another thing we believe in is we try to improve the environment all the time. Like, I think you should never be happy with what you have. You can always improve it. And pretty recent, like year ago or something, we really got tired from the way we were running tests. We were not happy with the test run we had, and so we basically end up writing our own test runner for JavaScript. And we've called it Testacular, which stands for a spectacular test runner. And so far, we've been really happy with it. So I'm really excited to be here today so that I can show it to you. But before I show you how it works, I would like to just quickly go through requirements that we had when we were writing this thing, or why we actually decided to write our own thing. And because we do test-driven development, I write it in sort of like test style. So the first requirement was it should be fast. And with fast, I'm talking about milliseconds or a couple of seconds, right? I don't want to wait for running my test more than a couple of seconds. And that's really important because if you have this quick feedback, you can actually, change your workflow completely so that you don't have to switch between text editor and the browser. You can just stay in your text editor and just execute the code from here because it's so fast. Another thing, it should use real browsers. It's probably something that is not that obvious, but there's so many inconsistencies between different browsers, and especially when it comes to DOM. And if you know Angular, all these custom components and attributes, basically we call it compiler. It's not really compiler, but the thing that we call compiler, it's just tons of DOM manipulations. And for us, in order to be sure that it works across the browsers, we just need to use real browsers. We just need to execute them. So again, whenever I push to GitHub, all these tests get executed on multiple browsers. And it turned out that there are some more advantages when you use real browsers. So for instance, with the real browser, you communicate just through HTTP or WebSocket. So I can use Testacular to test on my phone or my tablet, or YouTube guys use Testacular to execute their test on PlayStation 3 because that's their target device. Plus, browsers had a lot of very useful tools, like debugger, like Chrome has full-blown debugger. And once you're using the real browser, you can use the debugger as well. So there are some more advantages to use the real browser. And last requirement was it has to be stable, it has to be reliable. And this was mostly because our previous solution, we were using something called JS.driver, which I actually think is a really good idea. And Mishko, colleague of mine, was one of the guys who started JS.driver like 3, maybe even 4 years ago. And to be honest, Testacular is based on the same idea as JSTD, right? But the only problem was that the implementation just didn't work for us. It was flaky. It was really easy to get it into inconsistent state where you need to restart it all the time and you end up wasting a lot of time. So Testacular solves that. You can run it for several days. You know, it's okay. Things like syntax errors and all these things, it's just okay, no problem. Okay, I think we should do demo. Let me show you how we develop on Angular. So, so down here is my command line. I'm in Angular source code directory. So I'm just gonna start Testacular by Testacular start. And what's happening here is Testacular automatically starts a browser in the background, which is something you don't have to worry about. You can configure which browser you want to use and stuff like that. And since now it's going to execute all the stuff that we will be executing, it's going to use this real browser to execute the stuff there. But you can stay in your text editor. Plus, Testacular is watching my file system. It's watching the files of my project. And whenever I make any change into any of those files, it'll say, oh, this file has changed. Let's execute the test. So if I open, let's say this is source code of HTTP service, just service inside Angular. And look at this. If I save the file, watch the command line down there. It immediately noticed that and executed all the unit tests on Angular, which is almost 1,600 unit tests, and it took under 3 seconds, right? Executing 1,600 unit tests in 3 seconds. And 3 seconds is like, yeah, still, usually you still don't want to wait that long. So what we have is, let me show you the test. This is a test to the HTTP service. It's written using a Jasmine testing framework. Do you guys know Jasmine? Nope. Awesome. There's a lot of testing frameworks, and I think it's actually good. It's good to explain that the difference. That Testacular itself is not a testing framework, right? It's not. Yeah, you can pretty much use any testing framework you want. Like there is Mocha.js is a really nice testing framework. We use Jasmine. There's QUnit is used by jQuery, and a lot of other testing frameworks. So in this case, we are using Jasmine. which has this syntax for like describe basically defines a set, like suite, test suite, basically set of tests. So this is a test suite for HTTP service. And what I can do, I can use ddescribe, and at the point where I saved this, it just executed only the test within this suite. So executing these 80 unit tests took 100 milliseconds or something. And that's already pretty much instant, you know. You can see if I save it, it's almost instant. So that's what I usually do when I'm, for instance, debugging, or I'm fixing some bug or something, improving something on particular component in Angular. I usually run only the test of this component, and once I'm done with it, I execute all of them. You can do the same thing. You can do the same thing for individual tests. Like you can use, there's it basically describes a specification or the test. So you can do the same thing for it, and it will execute just one test. Another useful thing is console log, right? That's something you use in the browser pretty much all the time. So you can use that with Testacular as well. This is my source code. Let's say maybe I can console log some value here from the execution. Let's execute. This function basically parse. It gets string and it parses the headers into an object, right? Just so that you at least basically have idea what it is doing. So I'm going to do console log parsed, and I save. And instantly when I save, you see this screen is really small, but you can see the output from browser, right? This is the value, and I don't have to go to the browser. I can just immediately see that. This is kind of big, but if I do, let's dump key. That's an empty string, and it's still executing in the real browser. So you have all the DOM, pretty much everything, right? Window height is 624. I mean, probably not useful at this point, but you have all the DOM APIs, everything. Another thing you can do, you can use multiple browsers. So we actually use that very often when we are, for instance, debugging something in IE or something. You can capture multiple browsers. So let's say I'm going to capture, let's use Chrome. Capturing another browser is just pointing it to URL when Testacular is listening. So in this case, this port. I could take my mobile phone and capture it in the same way. And now Testacular knows that there is one more browser. And now if I execute the test again, it got executed in both Chrome and Safari. Right? Let me do this bigger. If I make the command line bigger, you can see there is the same value from Safari and the same value from Chrome. On this small screen, it's kind of like messy, but and with some IDEs, you can integrate it into IDE as well, like WebStorm or some like these clever IDEs. They have better support for that. I've been just recently contacted by WebStorm and NetBeans, so they are probably gonna do like better support for this, so that you don't have to run it in command line. But running this from command line is something you can use with any editor. Like you can use it with Vim, Emacs, Sublime, whatever you want, because there is no requirement from the text editor. All right, let me show you last thing. I'm gonna kill one of those browsers. And I told you that the cool thing about using real browsers is that you can actually use the tools that the browser provides. So let me show you how you can use debugger. Well, let's debug this function. I'm gonna put debugger here, And when I execute it, you can see that my Chrome in the background immediately jumped into debugging mode. And again, it's small screen, but you have Chrome debugger, so you can watch variables, you have call stack, you can step into functions, and pretty much the whole debugger, right? You can play with the console, you have access to the current scope of the execution, all these things. And again, there's no IDE support for that or something. If you use WebStorm, which is a really nice IDE for JavaScript, it has integrated this debugging into the IDE. So you can actually stay in your IDE and you just put debug breakpoints and debug directly from the IDE. All right. So I think that this is pretty much the demo I wanted to show you. There's a lot of other features, like you can write CoffeeScript and it will automatically compile the CoffeeScript. It integrates pretty well with Jenkins continuous integration server. So there are basically two modes where this was kind of like developing mode where it keeps watching the files and whenever you save, it executes the test. And it can run on the continuous integration server, which basically means you have some build and you start it, it starts browsers, execute the test, report results. It has support for require.js and some Angular specific stuff like to watch and how to compile Angular templates and stuff. A lot of other features. It's not coupled to Angular. You can use it even without Angular. So if you are interested, check it out on GitHub. It's open source and it runs on Node.js. So if you want to install it on Node.js, it's just npm install Testacular. And on the GitHub page, there is a screencast how to set it up and how to use it with WebStorm and all these kind of things. So I think that's pretty much it. Do you have any questions? Do you like it or yes? Yes. Yes. Testacular is pretty much just runner for JavaScript. We use it just for testing, but you could run anything inside. Like it's just communication with the browser, and yes, it has some APIs for testing so that it can report the test. So all you need from Jasmine is report the test results and stuff in some format that Testacular can display it on the command line.
We can use this this framework with other projects I've done like .NET or GSP. I mean, to test the JavaScript side. The
Oh yeah.
side. Yeah.
You I mean, I'm not sure what exactly is your setup, but I think you should be able to test any JavaScript with it.
Okay. Thanks.
There's a gentleman right there.
Hi. Is there a Visual Studio extension for Testicular already, or is it on the way?
It sounds like you should write one.
Yeah, I already Googled and there's no one, so perhaps.
Okay, awesome.
Awesome.
Pull request, welcome. That's another cool thing about Testicular. Like I'm really impressed. Like it's the same as with Angular. I'm really impressed by the community. Like there is actually a lot of features. Like recently, I just merged feature code coverage, so you can have code coverage. I forgot to mention that. You can have code coverage with Testacular, and you know what? I haven't written a single line of code for this feature. It was just these guys are awesome. So feel free to send some more pull requests to make it even more awesome. Okay, so let me finish. Let me close this with a quick story, because we have at Google this. It's a cool project. It's YouTube on TV. It's a project. It's written in Angular and it runs on PlayStation. And several weeks ago, we were helping the team to debug some performance issues, and I noticed they had about 100 unit tests, and I was like, kind of surprised because You know, for instance, double-click for advertisers, which is that's a huge project on Angular, but they have 4,000 of unit tests or something. And so I was curious, like, why don't you write tests, guys? And when I saw the environment and what does that mean for them to add a new unit test and how painful it is to run these tests and how slow it is, I was like, yeah, I kind of understand. And basically they end up not writing tests at all. And so the next week or something, we helped them to set up environment with Testacular. And this was really amazing for me because in like 3 or 4 days, I got an email from Tyler, a guy from the team, and like, Vojta, this shit is awesome. Like, it has changed our life. We test drive everything, you know. And it was, in 3 days or something, they had over 400 unit tests. So they basically, it took them over a year to write 100 unit tests, and then they wrote another 300 unit tests in just 3 days, you know. And the point is that you should find the tools that works for you. I mean, you don't have to use Testacular. I don't care, you know. But you should spend the time finding the tools that works for you and setting up the environment because it's so much worth it. Because then you will benefit from it every day, right? So thank you a lot.